Hey everyone, welcome to Locked On Lakers for Wednesday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky. What's behind Rob Pelinka's new philosophy for roster building? We'll tell you next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers first listen of every day, Monday through Friday, no matter how or where you get your podcasts. It's always going to be free and never behind a paywall. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go to watch the show, hang out with almost 21,000 subscribers who are very active in the mailbag, which is great. We really appreciate it. We are using these questions. We're using a couple of them, as you can see, for those of you watching on the rail today. A lot of those questions are part of the show. I do want to let everybody know that today's episode is brought to you by Jace Medical. Empower yourself when you purchase a Jace case, providing you with a personal supply of 5 antibiotics that treat 50 plus infections. Get yours today at jacemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com. I'm just going to assume that everybody knows how to spell the medical part, Andy. So we got a couple mailbag questions that we want to get to, and both I thought were pretty intriguing. And the first one, though, is related to yesterday's show. We spent a lot of time talking about the Lakers and Rob Pelinka and what appears to be a shift in how they're putting rosters together. Used to be, Andy, no long-term contracts, nothing that goes beyond, like, I don't know, basically I felt like everybody who worked there was on an hourly and could be cut as quickly as possible. Every summer was the summer of cap space and no long-term commitments needed into that. Now the Lakers have, if you look at their payroll, they've got multiple contracts going out multiple years. It's a very different way of doing it.
Yeah, we got this question from Ming37 just about what could have been the catalyst for this change. Is it LeBron pending retirement, the Westbrook experience, the new CBA, realizing that how Alex Caruso's eventual departure was handled, that was a mistake, decisions like that, combo of things, whatever. But as Ming pointed out, it can't be a new owner or new front office since that didn't change. I'm just curious and grateful. The cynic or realist in me says that it's at least in part the result of there being no real superstar route for them to go. I mean, other than Kyrie Irving, which would have been impractical, whether you're talking about like all the infrastructure of your roster that would have been gutted, or Kyrie needing to give up money in the process. The Lakers could not have paid him what he got in Dallas, to say nothing of the risks that come with Kyrie, whether you're talking about injuries or him losing interest in playing basketball. Like, there's just like there was a lot of, I don't know, limitations in terms of the Lakers trying to go that route. It's not like there were a bunch of superstars out there, and Rob Pelinka exercised extreme discipline in the face of this. But that being said,
well, I mean, but like to your point though, like, even if Kyrie wasn't Kyrie, like, waves arms about, like, with all the baggage that comes with it, even if, like, geez, we kind of want the guy, like, legit, like, it's a good idea, we want him to, it still would have been really impractical. So I just say that only because some people would be like, oh, well, it's Kyrie. Well, no, really, it was anybody. The idea that the Lakers could bring in a high-priced player this offseason was really impractical, even if it was a player that had fewer question marks than Kyrie.
I mean, I'd go so far as to say if it wasn't Kyrie, it was basically impossible, because there was nobody else that would have been available that the Lakers could have fit into all of the cap space that they could have possibly manufactured. Like,
well, even if there had, I'm just saying, even if there were two in a different year, there are 2 or 3, just they were not set up to be able to somehow get a $46 million.
That's my point. Yeah. They would not have been able to manufacture, like, Damian Lillard, for example. I don't know his exact salary for 23-24 off the top of my head. I just know the Lakers could not have created enough space to make it happen, even if they wanted to. You know, James Harden is not an option. Whether even if they had wanted to, thank God he's not an option, but that's not a possibility. You know what I'm saying? So like,
it does make you feel like the basketball gods are looking out for the Lakers by not making James Harden an option, not making Kyrie an option. It's just like, you know, thank you.
But that being said, though, it does seem when you look at a bunch of different things Pelinka's done since around the trade deadline of last season, and even getting, I guess, going back to the decisions that he didn't make in terms of the contracts that he wouldn't have accepted for Russ. I guess, you know, like he wasn't looking for just, you know, a bunch of expirings to create cap space for Russ, toss in some draft picks to make it worth it, whatever. Like maybe the mistake that was Russell Westbrook, which was like the most extreme version possible of stars at all costs, you know, 3-star model alongside LeBron and AD. Maybe there were some lessons learned from that. You know, it also, look, there is an element of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. This is a team that just went to the Western Conference Finals. You have to come up with a really good reason to not try to run that back. Again, considering
that's for
considering considering they managed to do this, get to the Western Conference Finals, despite having no time to work together, and a lot of that period without LeBron. Like it's really difficult to make that argument. And frankly, I imagine they recognized there would have been a lot of fans upset by it, as opposed to excited by bringing in Kyrie, as talented as Kyrie is. Like,
I don't think a lot of people would have been. I mean, it's Kyrie Irving, but it would not have been a popular move.
No,
at all.
No.
But I think even with a less polarizing star, it may not have been as popular as the Lakers would have expected, or maybe it would have been in years past. I think, you know, both of those things can be true. Like you can look at it and say, geez, I wonder on Earth 2 if they had access to 3 or 4 stars and could have made it work, or they could have kept the last year's core together. Like, what would they have done? Like, which thing would they have valued? Depth and continuity, or star and kind of the Phoenix model that they're working under? Star and like, you know what? We'll get some players somehow. And the Suns did okay. I think about as good as you could do with their constraints, but they still have some depth issues. There's no question about it. So I feel
and look, just so it's clear, depending on who that star was, you know, it could have been somebody that you make a very strong, compelling case. No, clear out everything, bring in that guy. You know what I mean? Like
they'll do in 2 years for Giannis.
Right. I mean, this idea that, you know, a 3-star model can't work, you know, Russ did not disprove that. What he did prove, though, was it can't just be anybody.
Well, no, he didn't disprove it because Russ isn't a star.
Okay, sure.
Anymore. But you understand. But that's part of this. Like, you know, is Bradley Beal enough? I think
Bradley Beal at least fits alongside AD and LeBron very well.
But is he? What I mean by that is is he enough of a star? Is he that much of a talent that you make that acceptable? Like, you know, if you could go get Jokic, okay, fine. You go get, you know, Giannis, you know, Luka. I mean, like, there are certain guys that it's a no-brainer. But the fundamental problem with, let me rephrase, a fundamental problem with Russ as part of your 3-star model is that Russ isn't a star in that definition anymore.
Not anymore.
There's one other thing that I think is really critical about this topic that we'll get to before we get to the next mailbag question, Andy, which is all about Darvin Ham and the heat of seats. We'll get to all of it next.
Locked On Lakers is brought to you by Jace Medical. And if the past few years with the pandemic, natural disasters, unforeseen emergencies have taught us anything, it's that you have to expect the unexpected. Everyone should feel empowered to take care of themselves and for their loved ones when it feels like the world has gone sideways. You want to be prepared. And that's why Jace Medical offers the Jace Case. The Jace Case provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use, gives you peace of mind so that you're not just hoping that you have access to medication in emergency. Jace Medical makes sure you have the medication in hand. Jace Medical, simple. They handle everything from the online evaluation. I've done it. Brian's done it. It's really easy, to licensed pharmacy medication delivery, to ongoing consultation and care. You don't want to get caught unprepared. And you can save more than $360 by getting these life-saving antibiotics with Jace Medical, plus an additional $20 off by using the code LOCKEDON at the checkout on jacemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com, promo code LOCKEDON.
So we'll get to the question about Darvin here in just a second. But the last thing I kind of want to say about this is this year becomes critical in so many ways. Like, there's the LeBron factor. Like, how many more years do you get of LeBron? Like, Anthony Davis gets a year older every year, and, a little bit more injury prone, whatever it might be. Like, but I mean, really, especially in the context of LeBron, Andy, like the year you have in front of you is the most important LeBron year. And so, this window with him just has a natural expiration date. But the other thing that I think is critical now, when you kind of step back, in the context of this conversation we're having, the Lakers made this change. They they pivoted in this direction, whether it's because it was the best idea. They thought it was like, what, we're doing it wrong. Let's do it differently. Or they just didn't have another option. There was no good plan B. That doesn't last forever. The stars at all cost mentality can come back. This year, in a lot of ways, I think serves as a confirmation of the philosophy, whether they got into it on purpose or accidentally or somewhere in the middle. If you go out and you have another Western Conference Finals run, you get one round further, you make it to the finals, you win a championship. It starts to really validate the approach and the roster philosophy that goes along with it. Doesn't mean you never make trades. Doesn't mean you don't look for another star. LeBron's going to leave at some point, and a star is going to come replace him. That much we know. But I do think this year becomes important for sort of validating the direction that they've taken.
Well, I would like to think that if, say, they only get to the Western Conference semifinals, they don't decide that this was an absolute disaster of a mistake and they panic and they trade everybody away for nothing, just trying to create as much cap.
Okay, maybe there's something in between.
I'd like to think that they don't have that rash of reaction.
We need more cap space. I gotta get cap space again.
I understand that this organization has a long, like decades-long ethos of it is always about the stars and nobody else matters. Right. Other than like a select handful of really awesome role players that if they're part of any other organization, they would have their jerseys retired. We've had this conversation many times. I'd like to think that they'd be more disciplined, but yeah, I mean, if nothing else, it's going to, I think it could inform this approach, but make them feel like just because it worked once doesn't mean you want to automatically recommit to it to the degree that the Lakers have.
Mm-hmm. And I fully expect that there will be transactions over the next few years. It's not like, you sign Jared Vanderbilt, Austin Reeves, Rui Hachimura, where they're like, these are your dudes for the next, no.
Gabe Vincent.
There will be transactions. But what I don't think you'll end up is with these what I hope that we won't end up with anymore are these setups where like your longest tenured Laker is like it's in his like third season or second season.
It was like that for
Davis,
LeBron.
Right. Anthony Davis is going to be here for a little while, but the supporting cast behind your star, you don't want all of them to be in year one or year two with the franchise. It's just not good. We talked about intriguing Western Conference teams, and I guess the Lakers. Neither one of us really. We call them exciting. We call them very good, but we both kind of feel like we know what they are. But this is one of those sort of overarching kind of long-term themes that sort of run through it. More mailbag, Andy. This one from Scott Sanchez was this on the YouTube page, I believe.
No, he emailed us.
Oh, this from an email. Oh, right. You're right. At KamenetskyBrothers@gmail.com.
Yep. And he had a few questions for us, but the one in particular that we wanted to get to, he said, Coach Ham, it was surprising last summer that he didn't choose a veteran head coach as an assistant. How long does he have this season with a very good roster before a change is needed? Meaning some new assistants, because Ham still has at least another season before he's on the hot seat. What I thought was interesting about that question that jumped out at me at first was just the idea that Darvin Ham may not have someone on his staff that's been a head coach before, but he actually has a very experienced staff.
Yeah, for people that don't know, it's Chris Gent is the lead assistant.
He's been an assistant for like 20 years.
I'm just looking at it now. Sixers starting in basically 2003, 2004 is when he broke in with the Sixers, and he's been on staffs consistently since then.
Right. Phil Handy's been a part of 3 championship staffs, the Lakers, obviously, but also Cleveland and Toronto. Jordan Ott has several years under his belt as an assistant. Like, you compare that to, when we covered Luke Walton, his time as head coach. And, while we liked Luke and we knew him going back to the time we covered him as a player, and both of us thought he had really high potential as a head coach that thus far has not been met. And it was surprising to both of us, but that guy had a staff that was insanely and frankly criminally inexperienced. Like, it was, other than Brian Shaw, it was basically a bunch of his buddies from University of Arizona who played in the league. And I mean, a lot of them, Jed Bushler, I know, Jesse Merman, these guys all know a lot about the game, but for a lot of them, their first time in the NBA on any staff was with Luke Walton, who had just started as a head coach. But
you compare that to when the Rams hired Sean McVay, who I think was 31, he was insanely young when
he's still not 40 yet.
No,
so.
He's not. Jerk. But they put him with Wade Phillips as a defensive coordinator. They gave him not just experience, but tons of experience. And that, I think they didn't do Frank Vogel any favors when they put Jason Kidd with him, because as we all remember, it was basically Jason Kidd and a dagger in the other hand. We all just waited.
The Lakers made it obvious who they really wanted to hire as the head coach was Jason Kidd. But because of the optics with the off the court stuff and, past domestic violence incidents with Jason Kidd, they did not feel comfortable making that hire to make him head coach. They just insisted that whoever they hired put Jason Kidd on the staff. And then if they would fire that guy, Jason Kidd would happen to be there. And the Lakers what are we going to do?
What are we going to do?
Yeah. I mean, they were comfortable paying him. They just weren't comfortable making him head coach, which is a distinction without a difference that frankly was ridiculous.
Yeah. So, what the Lakers did with Darvin was, you have Phil Handy, you have Chris Gent, and you have experience. And Darvin Ham, by the way, came in with a tremendous amount of experience as an assistant. So, I mean, it is a little.
Darvin's put in his time.
Right. Not that Frank had been a head coach before. It's not it is first time with the Luke Walton comparison. First time head coaches are not all the same. And Luke had a lot of time as an assistant as well. And he did run, for Steve Kerr in Golden State. But again, different deal. That was still Steve Kerr's team. This was Luke Walton's. Darvin has a pretty experienced staff. He just doesn't have somebody that you're going to look to right away and be like, oh, that's the guy who will be the head coach after they fire Darvin.
But I'm not surprised that they didn't add to the staff.
No. But let's break and then come back and kind of really get more into the meat of the question here, because there's both the idea of, does he need a different mix of assistants? What might they do to shake things up? But there's also an aspect of this question that I think is really important to acknowledge. So I want to do both those things next.
Locked On Lakers brought to you by FanDuel, and you can celebrate this NFL season with incredible offers from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And right now, new customers can bet just $5, $5, and you get $200 back in bonus bets guaranteed. And you can use those bonus bets on spreads, on player props, over-unders, futures, all sorts of different fun stuff. And all customers who bet $5 get $100 off NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Makes now the best time to join FanDuel. The app is really easy to use. Great user experience, all these different options right at your fingertips. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and celebrate the NFL season with an offer you don't want to miss. FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL.
So, to get to Scott's question here, I don't think they'll make moves inside the season. I do not think they would shake up Darvin's staff while the year is going on. I don't think that would happen. I also don't know where they would go get somebody.
I mean, that doesn't happen, period.
No, it doesn't really.
I can't remember that ever happening for any team, any coach, period.
Right. I do think, though, if the Lakers disappoint, that, there could be some shakeups in the offseason in terms of the staff. But that gets to the other part of Scott's question, which I think is important, because Darvin has, he acknowledges that Darvin has at least a year before he would be on the hot seat. I'm sure there's somebody still out there who thinks that Darvin may not be on, they don't like him. They don't think he did a good job last year. They don't think he deserves to be on particularly solid ground. But it is nice to see rational understanding that Darvin Ham, short of doing something like illegal this year, is not going to be fired during the season.
Oh, I mean,
they lose their 32 of their first 36 games or something. Okay, maybe, but under anything even kind of normal.
No, but it's pretty obvious when we read the comments section on the YouTube page, or a lot of the commentary we get on Twitter at Cam Brothers. The Laker fans have not bought into Darvin Ham. Like, they just have not bought into him as a coach. I think they feel like the team succeeded in spite of him as opposed to because of him. And look, there were certain things we saw with Darvin over the course of last season where I thought he could be slow to make certain adjustments, particularly the ones that moved him out of either his comfort zone or his preferred style of play. Like the Memphis series, for example, the opening one in last year's playoffs, I thought it took Darvin way too long to recognize that he needed to take Malik Beasley and or Troy Brown out of the rotation and give those minutes to Wenyen Gabriel, because they needed a third forward-sized body to help in those non-AD minutes, because even with LeBron and Rui out there, they were just getting crushed on the glass. They were getting crushed inside. It took way too long to finally put Wenyen into those minutes. And by the way, the minute Wenyen started playing, the Lakers ran away with it. Second round, though, against Golden State, I thought Darvin coached his ass off. I thought he was fantastic in that series. And then against Denver, other than game one, where for the life of me, I don't understand why he's open with that small lineup. And I think that was a big reason that they lost game one. It's like one of the few times where I think you can look at a coach's decision and say the coach lost them a game, like because of his decisions. But then he went back to a normal lineup. And to be totally honest, the biggest problem he had was Denver was better than them. And there's only so much a coach can do when the other team is just better. And by the way, coached by a really good coach himself in Mike Malone.
And no coach is perfect, particularly in the playoffs. And a lot of times, coaching errors, which are sometimes mistakes of, that are things you can recognize as mistakes going in, and sometimes are deemed mistakes based on the results.
Sure.
And so but coaches who win series, Mike Malone did things wrong during the playoffs. I'm sure it happened. He made decisions, put the wrong guy in. The difference is that team was so good and so cohesive that you didn't really notice. Like, it was okay. Like, you didn't see those mistakes, and they didn't hurt the Nuggets in any significant way. I mean, we should put it up. Like, tomorrow we're hoping to have our guest. So this would have to wait until Friday's show. But we should put that up. Just simple question. Have you bought into Darvin? We put it on the community page. on YouTube. We can put it on Twitter at Cam Brothers and get that, see what people say. I don't know. Like I there's definitely a healthy section of the Laker fan base who I 100% agree have not. But I wonder if there's more. I'm wondering if we're maybe underestimating, perhaps. So it'd be a good question to ask. Where are you on that question in terms of buy-in?
In terms of how I feel about Darvin?
Yeah.
I liked, on balance, I liked what we saw in Darvin.
Yeah.
First of all, his ability to keep that locker room together under really adverse circumstances, that's important. Like, that is a big part of your job as head coach. Like,
biggest.
Yeah, it's a huge part of what is supposed to be there. He got immediate buy-in. It was pretty clear from this group very quickly. I think he handled the Russ situation about as well as anybody could. I think he did it in a way that, he did what was necessary, but I thought he treated Russ with an incredible amount of respect and, reverence that, look, Russ is not the guy that he used to be. The fit was awful. Russ can be a maddening player to watch. But the truth is, the guy is a Hall of Famer. He deserves a certain degree of respect purely because who he is. It doesn't mean he should get his way all the time, which he didn't. But there's a certain amount of, you need to just acknowledge who this guy is. And I think Darvin walked that line really well. This team played incredible defense the overwhelming majority of the season, despite having personnel that at times was not, I think, on paper.
They played above water.
Right.
I think.
I think there are areas for him to grow, but as an inaugural season on a team with expectations, I liked far more of what we saw from Darvin than didn't.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think there are, Eric Spoelstra. Okay. Certain guys can take anything and maximize it in ways that are just, but that guy's a genius. And I think the best coach in the NBA, arguably one of the best coaches, the 2 or 3 best coaches of the last 30 years. He, I think, has shown himself to just be that good. There are a couple other guys who are around who are like that, but like Mike Budenholzer won a title and is gone. Guys, Frank Vogel won a title, he's gone. I think most coaches, if you give them something good to work with, can get you. There's a big chunk of coaches, at least, that if you give them something good to work with, they can get you good results. And the Lakers, the minute they gave Darvin something more reasonable to work with, got good results. But part of the reason I agree with you that they got those good results was because he had kept them invested all year long. If they had checked out for a moment leading into February, those moves wouldn't have panned out.
I don't know if they would have made the moves to begin with.
They might not have, but even if they did, they wouldn't have had the same impact because they would have been, mentally would have been starting with a team that was 2, 3 or 4, 5 steps behind and couldn't have cranked it up with the energy and the effort and the intensity and the togetherness that they did. So the work that Darvin did, even while they were sort of treading around 500, a little below 500 and all that kind of stuff, is what set the stage, I think, for this other prosperity to happen. So, I don't think he's one of the 5 best coaches in the NBA, but it's also unreasonable to think that he would be in his second season that good. He's not a liability. I think by any stretch of the imagination, he's not a liability. I think it'll be fun to watch this year to see with a different roster that he enters training camp with, that he's been able to plan for. Like, what do they do? What tweaks? And we'll look to the guys who really are great at looking under the hood and make sure we're having him on the show or bringing you some of that analysis, from, and like, what is he doing differently this year with different personnel? That to me is a huge thing. How do you maximize the players you have? How do you adjust to the skill sets of new guys? But I think he's up for that. I don't know. And his staff, I think, is up for that.
And look, Darvin, the bar will be raised for him in his second season. Like, there will be and should be less tolerance for certain mistakes your second year on the job with a better roster than your first year.
Yeah.
But I agree. There was much more that I liked from Darvin than didn't like. Real quick before we go, just because I thought this was cool, Jared Vanderbilt was on, I don't remember the name of the podcast, but he was asked about the players that he grew up watching. Because, Jared Vanderbilt is kind of an unusual player, like, stylistically and some of the things that he does well, the things he doesn't do well. He's got a decent amount of versatility. And he said that the two players that he watched a lot and tried to pattern his game after growing up were Penny Hardaway, big guard, and Lamar Odom. And LO saw this and tweeted out to Jared Vanderbilt, game recognized game. Always appreciate it when the young Bulls show love for the work that I put in, especially coming from a Laker that's a lefty. So I just thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, it is. And I also like when guys, who was it last year who picked up, who said that their role on it was KCP? Was it Demoy Hodge?
Yes, that is who it is. Demoy Hodge.
I love it when guys kind of recognize, I don't where they are. KCP's role player or whatever, but Lamar isn't a Hall of Famer. He's not you're kind of calling out a guy because you appreciate the style, you appreciate the skill set, you appreciate, and I just like when people appreciate Lamar Odom because
Lamar
is easy, given the trouble that he is had, at the end of his career and into his retirement. It's easy to forget just how good a player he was.
Just how he was a great player and an awesome person. One of both of our absolute favorite athletes we have ever been around. I actually wrote a piece for The Athletic a few years ago about how Lamar's like my favorite. I know he's not the best athlete I've ever seen or covered or whatever, but he may very well be my favorite just because a lot of talent, but impossible to dislike.
Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go to see the show, hang out with over 20,000 subscribers. Again, big guest we are planning on having tomorrow. Should be a lot of fun. We'll be back tomorrow and through the rest of the week. Everyone have a good day.